Hello everyone, and welcome to the definitive ranking of The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time.
Wow.
A big game. This is a big one.
Yeah.
Some might say the best video game.
The best video game.
It's the best video game.
Best video game. Period.
Let's see how the machine treats
The machine, yeah.
Ocarina of Time. So let's
What's your backstory on this game?
Have you played this game before?
Oh boy.
How many times have you played Ocarina of Time? Can you even
More
guess?
than any video game.
This is the most played video game.
Any single player, probably not the most hours. There's some games I've sunk hours into, but not like,
Okay.
you know what I mean, played through a story.
More hours of Zelda in this game than any other game, you think?
Probably not, no.
Probably Breath of the Wild.
No, probably not even that, because I've played it at least 9 marathons.
Okay.
So, it used to take me, 9 hours to beat it. So, yeah, no, probably more Ocarina. I probably spent more time with than any Zelda game.
You've probably played this the most different kind of ways as well.
That's true. Yeah, we had a year where we did our Warfare, which was so much fun. And what else did we do? Well, we had Jamie play Zelda, so I was editing footage of that and thinking about it a lot, and yeah, we did just all kinds of stuff with it.
Yeah, and you've done some speed runs of it.
Yeah.
And even now we've been streaming it with
You've been doing that.
Somebody who's never played the game before.
We we played through the Deku Tree, right? With blindfold.
We've done this blindfolded.
Did we beat the Deku Tree, right?
Yes, we did.
Wow.
Yeah. We've read a book about this game.
Yes. Oh, that's the other big thing. Yeah.
So we know. I would say we're close to being Ocarina of Time experts.
Right. I've 100%ed it, which is rare for a Zelda game for me.
Okay.
So yeah.
I've done that a few times. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's jump right into it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about the world of Ocarina of Time.
Yes.
I gave it a perfect 5 out of 5.
Perfect 5.
And you gave it a perfect 5
It's
out of 5.
Perfect. Right?
Well, I don't like using the word
I'm just
perfect.
kidding. I'm kidding. Because there's definitely its drawbacks, but
it's one of my favorite worlds in the Zelda series. I think just the overworld. There's a lot to keep in mind that this being the first 3D Zelda as well. But just the different regions are so memorable and so unique.
Yeah.
When you go up to Death Mountain, this is our first introduction to the Goron race in the Zelda series. They got, there a lot of the lore that comes from everything originates from this game.
Right. It even established kind of how the modern Zoras, even though they were in games before, this kind of changed how people viewed them in a lot of ways.
Right.
know?
Yes.
And you have the Gerudo and the Kokiri, which haven't really fully come back, but
yeah.
Even that set a thing. The Deku Tree, that kind of thing. Yeah.
So the different regions with their the character races, and just the geographical regions too. Just I like the landscape. I like the overworld. I like exploring it.
And just not just the races, but the characters are all. There's so many iconic characters. Some of that stuff too. Even though it comes from other games, it really feels like. So many people associate it with this game, but it does feel inextricable from Ocarina of Time as well. I'm thinking of you have the owl, which is obviously brought from Link's Awakening, and you had Malon and Talon, who are Marin and Terran. They did bring stuff from A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, and
for sure,
reestablish it here. And
in a lot of ways, this is a 3D reimagination of A Link of A Link to the Past.
Yeah. That's the thing. I noticed replaying it. Again, I'm playing everything chronologically, and I see a lot of DNA from that, and also a surprising amount of DNA from Link's Awakening. Okay. And it's both been okay, some of it's caused me with certain aspects of the game to be okay, this is just here because it was there, and maybe it wasn't as well translated, but then so much of it I was wow, they really they were tasked with make us a Zelda game in 3D. And they really nailed it, I think. So
right.
The world is, to me, it's maybe one of my favorite elements of it.
Yeah.
Even looking at my scores, obviously.
Right, yeah. And it's not just even like a lot of we'll get to this with some of the side content. There's a lot of like quirky characters like throughout the world too that I like, engaging with and exploring.
We didn't really talk about we're talking about it more from just thinking about the world, but then also I guess it's more with the pacing and progression, but how
it opens up,
how you can explore the world and everything is cool.
You're kind of jumping ahead, but that's important actually, because they do a good job of like opening it up in pieces, but still giving you enough freedom early on.
Yes.
I remember this was a few years back. I was playing it. I was redoing the walkthrough at Zelda Dungeon. I think this was back in 2016. And so I was like, after getting out of the Kokiri Forest, I was like just exploring the world to see what you can actually do and where you could go. Because usually after Kokiri Forest, you just immediately go and meet Zelda.
Right.
But you don't have to. You can go to the Gerudo Valley.
Yes.
You can go to Lake Hylia. You can go to Kakariko Village. You can go to Lon Lon Ranch. There's a lot of places that open up. Everywhere you go, the owl is everywhere and yells at you. It tells you to go to the castle.
Right, but even in a lot of those areas, there's something, almost every area, there's something to find, even if it's a little thing. And it does reward curiosity.
It does.
And it just, even if it's not much you can do, like, it does just help get you more immersed in the world.
Yeah.
Because it makes it feel like, oh, this is an actual place that I can go poke around in. Granted, the owl kind of takes away from that, but it's a little more frustrating. I think we've talked about other games where it's like, yeah, they take out that one little bit of thing you can do, and then it just really does feel like they're giving you a guided tour through the world,
right?
As opposed to like, I'm making my own way through the world.
Yeah, like I imagine if this was Minish Cap or Majora's Mask or something, there'd be some random NPC in front of Lon Lon Ranch, like preventing you from going, like you're now.
Minish Cap was a good example. I talked about the town where there's all these businesses you can go to, but through a lot of the game, there's people like, we're not open yet.
Yeah.
So I can imagine someone being like, sorry, the Lost Woods isn't open yet. Sorry, until you actually need to go there. And it's like,
right.
That's what's cool is we always talk about you can leave the forest and then there's so much to do. But even before you get to the Deku Tree, you can go putz around in the Lost Woods.
Not much you can do before. I don't think you can do anything.
No,
actually.
But you can go there.
Yeah.
That's what's neat about it, I guess.
Right. Yeah. I think you can get to the Sacred Forest Meadow,
which is also pretty cool that you can get there.
So we like the world of Ocarina of Time.
Love it.
Let's talk about the art style. And so to me, this is the lowest point for me. And I gave a very similar score to the art style for Majora's Mask. So I'm like kind of gonna rehash, I guess, a lot of what I said. But just this, I think, a little bit has to do with the primitive nature of like that early era of 3D. So specifically, some of the character models of like the Gorons, or not so much the Gorons, but like the Zoras. When I think of like the later iterations of them, where like how they advanced with Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild, like there's just so much more there, and like when you go back and look at this, there's like only 2 Gorons in the whole game.
Yeah, I get that,
and they're so it's a little bit limited. We did get like an upgraded graphical style, I guess, with Ocarina of Time 3D, which I think looks better, but it's still like, this is one of the only Zelda games I think you can look at and be like, some of those backgrounds or some of the designs, like, it's just graphically, it feels a little dated. This is not, I will say though, compared to most N64 games and PS1 games of that era, this game holds up way better than 99%, I think.
Yeah, I was actually gonna say I almost have the opposite view of what you were saying about like the Gorons and Zora, and that I feel like it, back to what we were saying with the world, it established their style. I think it's simplistic comparatively, but I think it's classic and iconic. I think about it similarly to how I think of the design of like a Goron similarly to how I think of like the design of like a Goomba in Super Mario Brothers 1, or like Pac-Man, where it's, there's like 3 shapes to it, but it's iconic and almost timeless to me. But maybe that has to do with just me having, maybe if I would feel differently if I played, in different order. But I think everything is. I didn't go 5 because I do think there are more inspired art styles for sure. But
when I think of like the best art styles in Zelda, like I think like I like the Wind Waker art style. I like Skyward Sword art style. I like the Breath of the Wild art style. And I'm talking about the 3D games. Like I don't really like the Twilight Princess art style, but I think I gave that a 1. But this is probably it's better. So Ocarina of Time's art style is better than Twilight Princess is what I'm trying to say. But I'm not sure I'd be willing to say that I think it's weaker than all the other 3D art styles.
I think too, and this is maybe I shouldn't even. It's not even like speaking for me really too, but I know a lot of people feel like this like established like people's modern conception of like what Zelda series looks like for a while. I think maybe it's changed a little bit, as opposed to like the previous era where each game you would almost get different interpretations of what. Maybe it's because it's 3D, but you get different interpretations. Where I remember looking at the manual for this, even though there's less concept art than before. I remember looking at it and being like, wow.
This game still actually had quite a bit.
Yeah.
It wasn't... This is sort of the end of the road, though, I'd say, of the kind... Majora's Mask had some, but not as much, where almost all the characters, or a good amount of the characters had artwork, all the races had artwork, all the items had its own official artwork. And not the enemies, though.
I think for a while, like, the designs influence... Like, you got, Link... When you had Link and, like, Soul Calibur or like Melee or whatever, it was like that. This was this imagining Link. Of Link, and then even I think of how they switched back with Ganondorf recently. For a while, he was always the Twilight Princess, and now the current Smash game, it's back to the Ocarina of Time Ganondorf.
Okay,
and I think it's just because
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, and I think it ties in. I guess what I was saying again with like just establishing so much of the way people that totally changed how people viewed Ganon the character, right? Some might say for the worse, but I don't know. I think it's iconic. It's not the best, but it's iconic.
So what you just said is kind of exactly what I think about our next category.
Okay,
the story.
Yeah
It is very iconic.
Yeah,
it's not the best.
That's fair.
I gave it a 4, and this is going to tie into the world and even the pacing a little bit. The main story of this game, I think, is very simplistic. It is incredibly simplistic. You only see Ganon. You see him in your dream. You see him in the midpoint, and then you fight him at the end, and that's basically the extent of it. You see Phantom Ganon. His presence is known a little bit, though.
I think it's very known.
Yeah, so they do a good job with that. But what I like best about the story is how it functions into the time traveling aspect, where you go to regions like what it was like before and after, and a lot of the characters, you meet like the sages is the story. I think it's the story that you meet Saria early on, and she's your best friend, and you later see her again. She teaches you her song, and then she becomes the forest sage. Like 7 years later, you don't get to interact with her or see much about her when you're an adult, but like it's a good drawback to what you experienced earlier in the game.
Yeah.
And perhaps this is more so with characters like Princess Ruto and Darunia.
I think Darunia is... Well, I think all of them, yeah. There's one thing I noticed the last time I played it was all the character. A lot of the characters are talking about like growing up and becoming a real man, and they even are talking about that before the game really is saying you're going to grow up, and I find that kind of interesting that's like a thematic element of, and I think that's probably why it probably resonated with a lot of kids at the time, probably a lot of young boys, because it's like I can imagine feeling like, oh, it's so cool. I was playing as a kid like myself, but now I grow up and I'm a big, strong guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess it has that, like, your character matures throughout the game.
Forcefully matures, Yeah. I have one thing I think is kind of cool about it. This is what I was talking about fusing the last two games, because you have kind of the overall, like, game structure of A Link to the Past in there, of get 3 things, get the Master Sword, and now the world is different, and you see it like,
it's identical, pretty much.
Right. But they added in, I think, making the stages like these distinct, not just characters, but like different races, but also characters who have their own personality, kind of adds a little bit of character to it. And I think I mentioned in A Link Between Worlds that they reverse engineered that back into A Link Between Worlds.
Right. And they don't do as good of a job in A Link Between Worlds. You don't care about the characters.
That's true, yeah.
You don't really, like, for most, not all the Sage. I mean, nobody cares about Rauru.
Yeah.
Or even Naburu is kind of like, because she's sort of just tossed in at the end because you don't have an experience with her as a child. Well, you do, but not in the same sense.
Yeah. That they could have done better. But then also the thing they bring, I was kind of thought this was kind of cool, was then all these when you're an adult, all these different stories you have peppered in Sheik showing up and kind of giving out these little poetic bits of musings on the situations, and it reminded me a lot of the owl in Link's Awakening, who just kind of shows up and just drops these. It's very simplistic, but gives you these little tidbits, and it's like something to think about, you know? And I love that. I like the simplicity of this story.
And you know, the writing is actually pretty good too.
Yeah.
It gives it a sense of a grand adventure. Like when you're talking to Sheik, like when you go back to the Temple of Time after beating the Forest Temple, like she's like, yeah, in order to, you know, awaken the sages, you're gonna have to climb mountains, dive deep underwater,
even travel through the house of the dead.
Yeah, and then even through time, you know, like like whoa.
Yeah.
And it gives that vibe of a, you know, it's good writing actually.
It is, yeah. Like I think they have very limited, you know, space to get it in, and I think they do a good job with it.
So we both gave it a 4. Let's talking about the pacing and progression, which our staff gave it a 4.4, and the community gave it a 4.3, which are some of the highest regards other than music, which we'll get to later.
Okay.
I gave it a 5, and we kind of talked about it earlier, and
it's awesome in that regard. I went 4, but I think it's awesome.
It really is how the world opens up. I mean, we've talked about on this channel before how we felt the Great Deku Tree is the best intro dungeon. It's a really good opening. The whole opening is so good. Like it doesn't take too long. It's not too tutorial based, but it's like even the tutorials are built into that first dungeon, which makes it it doesn't have the slow slog of that a lot of 3D Zelda games, I think every single one actually until Breath of the Wild has had.
Yeah.
And then just, you know, how the world opens up, and then they even throw a little bit of a curveball, I think. Once you become an adult, then the game opens up where there is a, you know, like sort of like a perceived order that you have to do things in, but it's not actually defined. No. You can go to the ice cavern right away. You can go to the fire temple. I mean, Navi will yell at you and tell you to go do things or something.
Yeah, but Navi's not too intrusive like people say. It's pretty easy to kind of move on, but it's kind of good to keep you on task, and you got the map. But yeah, it's totally likely that, because Sheik tells you like go to Kakariko, you need the hook shot, and it's totally possible to be like, well, what's up the mountain? I remember being up the mountain.
Not only that, there's a big ominous like cloud above Death Mountain at that time.
Yeah, and when you're there, you could go to the windmill and get started on that quest. Like there's a lot just right there to kind of get you going.
Right, exactly.
And they even, you know, there's confusion about what are the last 2 dungeons.
Yeah, are you supposed to go, like, I think the order in your inventory basically shows Spirit Temple as the 4th one, right?
Yeah, I think so, right?
But the game guides you to the Shadow Temple.
Yeah.
So
I do love that element. Yeah, I think the way the game unfolds is great. I don't remember. I think I marked it down a little because I did feel like this has maybe more to do with the dungeons, which I also went just a little bit down on, but I felt like there could have been a little bit more. Like, it feels like with the water temple, you kind of get the most like brain burner of a dungeon, and then immediately after that, actually like all after that, I think they're pretty easy.
Okay. And
so I was just thinking more of progression of difficulty, but otherwise, like, I think the game opens up. I feel like an amazing way, but yeah, I feel like they could have had like just one more like kind of complex challenge to kind of get you. But
like the dungeons in particular, they get progressively more complex, I think, the first 3.
Yeah.
And then once you get to the Forest Temple or Fire Temple, whatever, from that point onward, I don't know if there's like well, we'll get to that in a bit, but I don't know how significantly different they are. Like, it's kind of like, it's not like there's no super hard dungeon at the end. But let's jump ahead and talk about the gameplay and the combat. And it's probably worth mentioning that, like, when this game first came out, it was kind of revolutionary because of the targeting system. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of something that I think every 3D game in this Zelda series has kind of taken that. And that's just normal in video games now, it seems, right?
Yes.
And that was, like,
pretty common, if not, like, the standard.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's, that's, like, an essential part of the gameplay, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
And the combat is, like, the sword combat is kind of simplistic.
It's a little simplistic. I will say, though, like, games that have tried to, like, in the series that have tried to, like, evolve it beyond that, I think have totally missed the mark for me. Like, they made it so you could, I feel like, do more things, but they didn't make it more of an interesting challenge, really.
Okay.
Like, I think of, like, the parries and the stuff, or the hidden skills. Like, to me, they didn't make this, like, give you a bunch of tools to, like, that, like, show up in combat. It's more like, you could just kill this guy like you normally would in Ocarina of Time, but now you could, like, shield bash him.
Right.
Or maybe they make it required, but it's still a matter of just doing those inputs. Until, I think, Breath of the Wild.
Right, yeah.
I think then they took those things they added and actually made them unique tools to use.
Yeah.
So, because that's usually what comes up a lot when I talk to people about the gameplay, and they go, "Oh, it's simplistic. You just wait for stuff." And I'm like, "Yeah, but I have yet to see anything other than that that's, like, really much more impressive to me."
Right. I'd argue that the gameplay in this is it's virtually identical through Twilight Princess, I would say.
Yeah.
Maybe Skyward Sword is a little different, but I mean,
yeah, sure.
For sure, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, and Twilight Princess all followed the same template, basically.
But it's and they all those games. I'm not trying to diss those games. All these games feel good, and I think Ocarina of Time still feels good. And it's a game made in the late 90s, a 3D game, experimental a little bit, and it still feels really good to play.
Yeah.
There's some, I marked it down a little bit because there's just some things that are done better in other games, or, like, it goes back to, like, maybe translating things to 3D, and it's like, well, we got a boomerang here because you have boomerangs in Zelda, but, like, it's not really that fun.
Yeah, correct.
But,
yeah. Some of the item utilization was not quite there, and the camera work could be a little wonky at times, I think.
Yeah, you don't have a free camera, so I could see other games going up higher for sure.
But you mentioned, like, the boomerang and like the items.
Yeah. Like,
I think Ocarina of Time does a good job of. It took a lot of the items in your inventory from A Link to the Past and brought it. It's almost all of the inventory is from A Link to the Past, I think.
Yes.
I mean, it was. I do like. Some of the new edition. I mean, the slingshot, is that kind of a new edition, or is it just like it's like a kid's version of the bow and arrow?
In fact, yeah, because you can't use it. That's one thing that's, like, it's kind of weird to me. It's like you get all these items, and you become an adult, and now you don't have their functionality, but then you get things that were those. And so you're just like, oh, I got this item, which is cool and new, but it's also sort of what I already had.
Right.
So it's, like, kind of a bummer, but
I kind of understand, like, okay, the slingshot you can't use as an adult, but you get the bow and arrow. That's like it's like a grown-up's version of the slingshot, I guess. But why can't you use the boomerang?
I don't know.
Is a boomerang for kids? Is that what is implied?
I guess. Sorry, Australia.
Is that where boomerangs are most known for?
Yes.
I don't know. Okay.
Sorry, Gorias, I guess.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a little goofy. Or some it's just weird. Like, I think like the Deku sticks are, like...
Are they kids only?
No, those aren't actually.
Deku nuts you can use as both.
No, Deku sticks, yeah, you can't use as an adult. I think the hammer replaces that in terms of, like, the functionality.
Oh, but they're totally... Well...
Yeah, I just mean, I think it takes that slot. I could be wrong. Someone who knows more about the the code get back to me, but
okay.
yeah.
But in general, I like the diversity of the items. I think they do a good job of mixing in some not that many like super optional stuff, but they have like the magic stuff, like the Furor's Wind and Nehru's Love. You know,
yeah,
those are
fun.
They remind me of like the elements from A Link to the Past.
Yeah.
Different functionality kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, you get the optional ice arrows, which not too many uses actually for it, but
it's cool.
I like most of the items.
They're used well in the game. It's pretty solid arsenal, but yeah.
I think I always have the hook shot equipped once I get that.
That's
It does suffer from a little bit of that Link's Awakening syndrome of there's too much of you get an item and then you just upgrade that same item. Yeah. So you get the Fairy Ocarina, then the Ocarina of Time. You get the hook shot, then the long shot, the iron boots, and the hover boots. And you get the silver gauntlet so late in the game, and then you immediately get the golden gauntlets. Like a little bit of awkwardness, I think, with the leveling of the items.
And they do have some good spots where it's like you could maybe use different items and stuff like that. Like there's some flexibility, as opposed to like you have to use this item here.
Okay.
There's a little bit of that, so.
The dungeons.
Yeah. It's a pretty good set of dungeons, I would say.
I think I want to say, off the top of my head, I gave A Link to the Past and Twilight Princess 5s for dungeons. And I think this is right up there. Those are the best. Like, to me, those games, along with this one, have the best dungeons. Some of the most memorable ones. I know at Zelda Dungeon last year we did a feature on the website where we ranked our top 50 dungeons, and the Forest Temple was number 1 overall.
Yeah.
Forest Temple, one of my favorite dungeons. The Great Deku Tree is really good. The Water Temple, perhaps the most iconic dungeon in the Zelda series.
Yeah.
A lot of different elements. Like, they're so unique too. Like, the Forest Temple is one of those good examples of where it allows you. It gives you the freedom to explore. There is a right path, like a correct path. You have to do certain things before you can progress. But like, the game doesn't like hold your hand like it does in other 3D Zelda games in particular, where it's like everything is blocked off until you get the one thing. Yeah, you know what I mean. So I think it does a good job of the dungeons do a good job of opening things up within themselves as you go. Maybe the Shadow Temple notwithstanding.
Yeah. Shadow Temple, and then I feel like Fire Temple's a little bit more straightforward too, but it's kind of intentionally so, because you're sort of climbing these volcanoes is kind of the deal they're going for there. Okay. But
it's also one of the first, I mean, maybe this is more because it's a 3D game, but the elemental aspect was huge in this game.
Not just elemental too. I think they expected for it to be more interesting than just here's a water dungeon. So it's like especially the first theme one you get, you're inside Jabu Jabu's belly. So it's such a unique setting right out of the gate, trying to really stand out, not just be like here's the water dungeon. And then when you get to the Water Temple, we did a whole video about it, but it's a little bit more mysterious and spooky than you would kind of imagine, or like the Forest Temple isn't just the Forest Temple, it's haunted, there's the ghosts and stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah, really distinct, unique settings. I said I think the other ones you mentioned I liked more. I feel like there's more consistency in some of those. And then what I mentioned earlier, how I feel like it tops out for me at the like Water Temple of being like the most exciting, kind of challenging one. And then the other ones are cool. I love all the dungeons, actually. I think there's not a bad dungeon in the game or anything, but yeah, it just kind of was like not as cool. And then the last two are really like cool conceptually, but they're a little less. I kind of wanted there to be like one more that's like give me a good challenge.
Okay.
Like the last time I played it, I was like, okay, the last ones are fun, but they're a little bit more, they're pretty straightforward. Like, it's cool. Like the Spirit Temple is it's like 2 mini dungeons almost smushed together. So that's a cool gimmick, but it also then is like kind of 2 more simple dungeons that kind of barely cross together. And I feel like they could have done something a little bit more with the time.
Okay.
The time travel which Ages does have that.
Yeah.
So
Right. Yeah. There's not really that much.
yeah.
Actually, is there anything where you do in the past that affects the present? It's just
No. Well,
you
there's
just have to get the gauntlets.
you do. Well, there's, I guess, for the Shadow Temple you do, like, I feel like Bottom of the Well is like part 1.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then with Shadow, yeah, it's like, then it is like a full-blown part 1 and 2.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, not really otherwise. But yeah, and then it's the first one to have like full-blown, I think, mini dungeons, which is a point in its favor.
Right? Yeah, for sure. With the Ice Cavern, the Bottom of the Well, and even the optional...
And then there's a bonus one, which I guess we had in the Color Dungeon or whatever, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it retained the first 3 games all had a Ganon's Tower at the end, or the Great Palace. But I mean, this it was kind of unique because it had all the different elements, which is sort of what they had with...
That's the thing I touched on in my dungeon series, and it's something both Corey and I kind of shared in common in that, is that we almost preferred the Ganon's Castle or Ganon's Tower in A Link to the Past, where it's just like a total mix of all the elements and you don't know where you're going to get, instead of like these separate...
Okay.
Each dungeon has its own separate micro challenges, and some of them, I pointed this out, and it's not too much of a mark against the game, but some of those challenges in Ganon's castle or whatever in Ocarina of Time are some of the worst puzzles I've seen in my life.
I'm just thinking the one with there's like a bunch of BMOS and blade traps and get the silver rupees or something. Like,
yes, it's a lot of get the silver rupees. The worst puzzle in the Zelda series is in that dungeon, and it's where you walk into a room and there's a locked door in front of you and there is a Triforce on the ground, and you play the Zelda's Lullaby in the Triforce, and a chest comes down and it has a key in it, and that's the whole room.
That room should just not exist.
It really feels like, and I don't know, because I think they did an incredible job making this game, but it feels like, what do we do? We're out of time. I don't know. Locked door, key, play the song,
No enemies, nobody.
Which in the previous dungeon, there's a door that's locked, and you have to stand on the Triforce and play the song.
Right.
And it just opens it.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so we added a key.
Yeah, nobody's getting... that's just filler. That is the definition of filler. Granted, it takes all of 30 seconds to go through that room, but I mean, that's... Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry. I don't mean to hark on it, but I think other games have better dungeons, but I will say these are all iconic. Like, most people...
Right.
Like you said, on the list. They're all iconic dungeons, so... Amazing.
I think also some very iconic...
For sure.
Bosses.
Yeah.
That came out of these dungeons. And talking about the enemies too, it was nice to see a lot of familiar enemies from prior games like come to life a little bit in 3D. That was nice to see. Some of them not so much. Like I don't like the Octoroks in this game. I'm like, why are they in the water now? Like, I want to see.
They changed them. They're octopuses now.
Yeah,
that's too bad.
But it was nice to see Tektites in 3D. We get to see those in A Link to the Past before, but now
we did like a video a long time ago that's like enemies in Ocarina of Time or something like that, and I don't remember what I said, but or if maybe this is contradictory, but it's kind of sad thinking about the Moblins. They kind of got relegated to just
one screen, basically.
Yeah,
like
I think of them as kind of a classic common enemy, and nowadays they're like Moblins. Well, Moblins are back, but then we got into all these other blins, and I'm like, what happened to the good old fashioned Moblin?
The OG blin. yeah, they're just patrolling the sacred forest meadow,
and they just charge at you. And then there's the one guy's cool,
the club Moblin. Yeah,
I love that guy, but.
But the bosses, it was nice to see like a lot of reimaginations of some old enemies too. Like Goma,
Yeah.
We had seen Goma in previous games, and now we got to see it as like a giant.
And I think with them too,
whatever it is.
we got what I was saying with the art style, like them kind of establishing what people think about when they think about Zelda series and like the characters and enemies. Because I think they tried to give it more. Because I think previously. Not 100%, but they were like more playing on just kind of classical fantasy elements, and this it was like this kind of made it all. This kind of put everything under the umbrella of like Zelda and its own unique style. And even then, things have been unique in different ways. But King Dodongo, for example, whereas before it was like he was a dinosaur.
He disliked smoke.
He didn't like smoke, and he still doesn't want that smoke.
Yeah, he's actually the same thing from Legend of Zelda. It's an Ocarina of Time.
Yeah, he's the same, but I'm talking about in terms of his design. It became something more like, I feel like before it was like, yeah, he's like a big old dinosaur guy, but now he doesn't look like anything other than like this unique fantasy character. Whereas before he looked like a Triceratops or whatever.
Okay.
Or like Goma looked a little bit more like just like more standard spider, but now Goma is like, it just has a slightly more unique design. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then we got totally like unimaginable bosses that are not from previous games, like Baronade and Bongo Bongo is like one of the freakiest looking bosses ever.
Yeah, we fight a fire dragon. I mean, we fought him. We were a similar version of him in Adventure of Link. But like
Barba.
Yeah, which has been get retconned and is now called Volvagia.
No, what? Yeah. Okay, that's
hot
cool.
garbage there. But it also I couldn't give it a 5. I think you know why. Because it has my least favorite boss in the entire Zelda series.
Gosh, yeah.
Morpha. So, sorry. Can't get a 5 from me.
Bad. My reason, I think, was just kind of going back to gameplay, the dungeons even, where it's all classic, iconic, but it's not the best, and it's a little simplistic. A lot of the bosses are kind of simplistic. It's like do the one thing. Like Dodongo, it's like throw the bomb in his mouth. That's all there is to it. So pretty simplistic, but hard to deny that it's iconic and classic. So,
okay. Well, let's talk about the side content and the extras, which I'm just glancing here. Both the community and one thing I'd like to say is the staff and community are like remarkably identical with almost everything in this game. I think everything was. The biggest one was items and abilities was 0.2 off. Everything else was either the same or only a tenth of a decimal point. But they both gave the side content. It was the only thing they gave under a 4.
Wow. Harsh.
Yeah, harsh. I gave it a 4. And I like the good portion of the stuff. I mean, they've got. We kind of touched on. They had that optional dungeon, the Gerudo training grounds, which you never have to step into. Do you consider Epona as an optional quest?
Sort of, I guess, yeah.
The training sequence isn't new. We saw that in Link's Awakening, but this was cool because it involved a lot of the characters. This is sort of what I was talking about with the story, too. It was like characters, in a good portion of those, you had already met before, or at least some of them. You had met the Carpenters before. You had met King Zora before, but now they play a role in this trading sequence. It was fun just navigating the world a little bit. I didn't give it a 5 because some of the collectathons are not the most exciting stuff, like the pose in the overworld. And the Gold School tools are fun. They're good. Perhaps not enough rewards and like. Why do you need more than 50 of them?
Right. I mean that's I went 5. I'm never like a big 100%er person, but it kind of has a similar thing to what I was saying last episode about Link's Awakening, where there's not like a ton of different things, but what there is, I think, is good. And I don't know, like I other than when we did Warfare, like I would never get all the Skulltulas, but I feel like they're there if you want to get them. Yeah. But otherwise, the pose I don't like, actually. Yeah. I'm willing to say that. So maybe that make it.
I don't like how they appear in their specific locations, and it's like
it's awkward.
It's almost like you need a guide.
It's not intuitive. Yeah, that's the only thing I don't like. I feel like the Skulltulas, it's like there's enough that they give you kind of satisfying things if you want, and then if you're a total sicko and you want to get them all, you can.
Sicko. This guy just called me a sicko.
It's not like the Korok seeds where there's just like an insane amount. But
no, I just think that the lack of rewards later on is weird.
Yeah,
like you get a reward at 10,
about
20,
that. Like, what else could you get?
Oh, I don't know. They could have just put more heart pieces in there or something.
That's true.
I don't know.
Yeah, because like by the time you get to the end of the game, you're
a little overpowered.
Yeah.
I would say this game does not have a good economy. You always have way too many rupees.
Yeah.
It could be a little bit content.
more well thought out, but they also have mini games that are fun. Like I love the target practice, and you actually get like upgrades, quiver upgrades, and satchel upgrades or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Which I was thinking back on, like previously, like A Link to the Past has the archery games, but I don't think you get any.
Those are just rupee upgrades, yeah.
It's kind of stupid.
Yeah, it is. Although, granted, who needs 50 Deku nuts? Who needs 50
you don't.
Deku?
But it's
bullet bag upgrade? Like,
it's back to what you were saying, though, where it's just like,
what are you going to
get? It's just
them?
cool to get.
Yeah.
I don't need them, but why not?
Worth mentioning the fishing. Not a big fan, but it's a good environment, and it's cool to be there.
It was, so compared to, like, I don't know, like Link's Awakening, it's like a cute little mini game, and that was like the first fishing. And then in this, it's like, I remember having it back in the day, and it just feeling cool. You can like go fishing, and it feels like, compared to the Majora's Mask one, which has more to it, but is not good, because you've gone into why. At least it's like, it's similar to the Skulltulas, where it's like, it's just there and you can go do it if you want, and it's fine, you know. There's no time limit, like the world's not going to end. So I just remember being a kid and being like, oh cool, fishing, I'm fishing, you know, and I try to catch a bigger fish, you know. It's not really that well thought out, but I think it's a quaint mini game. Not even mini game, it's just a quaint thing you can go and do. It's relaxing.
Probably worth mentioning, this was post the N64 version, but then there was the Master Quest, and then
Master Quest,
and with the 3DS version there was the Boss Gauntlet mode.
True.
A lot of good additions for the post
horse racing.
Oh yeah, that's in the base game.
But I'm just saying other things.
So pretty good side content.
I think one of the most iconic side quests to me, it's kind of a small thing, but is collecting the Cuckoos. And they brought that back in other games.
They have, but I think this is the best one.
It is.
Yeah, the Minish Cap one's kind of fun too, but
and we've found like a lot of fun ways to incorporate that. We've done like competitions about it and stuff like that. And it's just, I think that's a classic quest. I don't know.
Last but not least, music and sound. 4.7 from the community, 4.7 from the staff, and 5s from you and I.
Yeah.
Is there anything to say about the music? Do you have anything to say? Is it even worth talking about?
It's iconic. It's timeless.
There's so many good songs. You can ask, I think, like 8 different people, and they might give you 8 different answers. Like some people, like to me, the songs immediately comes to mind are some of the dungeon themes. The Forest Temple theme and the Spirit Temple are some of my favorite songs. But other people can name 15 songs and might not even name either of those.
Yeah, sure.
Some like the Song of Storms is one of the most iconic.
Right, it's a music-based game.
Yeah.
So all the Ocarina songs are big, but then you had the first game to have like totally distinct dungeon themes.
No, that's not true. Link's Awakening did, but.
Oh yeah, no, you're right. Well, it was the first. It was the first in terms of, you know what. Is actually kind of a bummer is there's not a lot of different boss themes.
Is there just one?
No, there's 3.
Okay.
There's a boss theme, then there's a dragon boss theme that comes up twice, and then there's like a Ganondorf, I think, has a unique theme, and Ganon maybe, but I think those are unique. I could be wrong, but yeah. So I don't know. I think there are better soundtracks, but
okay. I think it's one of the best, and it also did a good job of incorporating a lot of A Link to the Past songs.
Yes.
So stuff like Zelda's Lullaby and Kakariko Village. So it brought a lot of
those make sense too to come up. But I think about it similarly to like what I was saying about the art style, where it brought all these old elements that are recognizably Zelda. You know, you hear the fairy fountain theme and you're like, that's Zelda. But then it expanded what the world of Zelda means, and also kind of brought it under this new umbrella. So you have like there wasn't really an area or characters or anything like Gerudo Valley or the Gerudos in the previous games. And that kind of became a whole distinct sound, a total different style of music.
Right.
Know?
Yeah.
And then like the Gorons, it's the same thing with their designs, their music, and everything. It like totally gets a lot across,
right,
on all mediums with them. So
Gerudo Valley's theme that won our
so
musical
good.
March Madness. I remember back in 2019, I think. So
it's a classic song. Yeah,
there's so many classics. The Temple of Time, Zora's Domain.
Zora's Domain. We've seen used over and over. Yeah, it's
good soundtrack.
It's great.
So let's get into the final numbers. So
you got what you wanted.
Ocarina of Time came in a very solid second slot for me, right? Above all the ones below it, and still nothing's gonna touch A Link to the Past. For you, it split the Link's Awakenings. So if I ask you, I'm like, I rank these 3 games. I'm gonna give you Ocarina of Time, Link's Awakening, and Link's Awakening.
Yeah, well, I can give it the same score as Link's Awakening DX.
Yeah,
I like mine where it ended up. It's one of those things where, it was never really my favorite game ever, and then when I started doing stuff for the site and then the marathon, it's just like it's one of the most accessible games.
Yep.
And so me being someone who just couldn't do anything like super well, it was like an easy game. Like I can stream that, and so then it just kind of grew on me, because I think I was always a Majora's Mask person, and even Link's Awakening I liked a lot, and then as now I've become like a very serious Zelda person, and even with this remake, this go through I've done through the series with my dungeon series, it's like there's been some chinks in the armor of Ocarina of Time.
Yeah,
where I'm like I actually appreciate most of the games in the lead up to it just a little bit more, and I think it did an incredible job of moving the series into 3D. But yeah, I actually do like A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening just a little bit more. I think they're just slightly more consistent games. But Ocarina of Time brought a lot of new charm to the series that didn't exist before. So, I love it's right along. To me, it's right up there with those games.
And our staff put it with a score of 4.2 as the number 1 game,
just above Majora's Mask.
And the community, I have a separate sheet here, because we went to the 5th decimal spot here.
Gosh.
So Ocarina of Time has an average score of 4.19838, and Twilight Princess had 4.19839.
Wow.
So our community, what this really means is literally if one person voted, if there was one more Ocarina of Time fan that voted in our poll that's watching this video that didn't, it would be number 1.
Wow.
Granted, there could have been more Twilight Princess people that voted as well, but I mean,
yeah.
Or if there were more Andy Spateris out there who voted for Twilight Princess.
But it's kind of cool what we've got now.
So we've got 4 distinctive number 1s: Twilight Princess, Ocarina of Time, A Link to the Past, and Majora's Mask. Between our 4 lists, and we still have a few games to go. I don't know how much the top is going to change. There's still this one new Zelda game that came out like a few years ago that we got.
I'll have to look into that one.
Yeah. I think it's on that Switch platform.
I don't have one of those.
Okay, it's one Nintendo's trying some new stuff.
Oh, it's a Nintendo.
Yeah. It's the Zelda game that they released on Nintendo. Anyway, yeah, we'll see what Breath of the Wild does when that eventually gets.
Yeah.
But we're not there yet.
No, we got a few more.
We got
not all jobbers. There's one game that will go high on someone's list.
Yes, for sure. It won't be this one for me though.
No.
But next month we are going to talk about The Legend of Zelda: Four Swords Adventures. A bit of a unique one because you had to play in multiplayer. Oh no, you didn't. You could play single player. Sorry.
Yes.
But it's a distinctive game, single player, multiplayer.
Oh, totally.
The poll is in the description below. Whatever style you played this game, you should rank it based on your experience. So if you've never played this multiplayer and you only know the single player, rank it as you see fit. And I don't know, how you rank dungeons or something, but
Similar to whatever Hyrule Age of Calamity
and the Wand of Gamelon.
Interpret these how you want.
Yeah, categories are whatever you feel. So thank you all for watching, and join us next month for some Four Swords adventures.